The third one is actually one of the most common ones. So it is, and that is authentic spirituality. And by authentic spirituality, what I'm trying to distinguish there is, for some people, their religion is a set of things that they do, but it hasn't yet necessarily penetrated into who they are. And so it may be a set of religious traditions, but it's not sort of authentic to who you are. So authentic to who you are, authentic spirituality is trying to figure out what's the meaning of life, why are we here, what is our purpose in life. And there's sort of two times that you have to think about that: when you're in college and when your kids have left. In the middle of life, it's very difficult to figure out what the purpose of life is, because if the purpose of life is trying to figure out, building truth brick by brick of things that you believe are true, when you're in that middle of life, you feel like you're on a boat with rotten boards, and you're just trying to slap up the good boards over the rotten boards to keep your boat from leaking. And trying to figure out what's true in the midst of that storm is very difficult. You kind of have to land your ship first, and then you can try to figure out where there's truth. So authentic spirituality is just trying to figure out who you are at the core of your being. And there's a whole set of communities and nonprofits that are involved in that. And then there's a whole set of actions that you might do because of that. But it will change the way your life is lived. So no matter what answers you come up with, I think that's an important and valid part of life, because I think that financial planners who understand there's a spiritual side of life do better than financial planners who only keep score by how much money you have. And so I just think there's a difference there. And to do life planning values, I think it's important that you understand what the purpose of your life is. And so everything sort of falls out from that, including perhaps the first two we talked about. Your family values may fall out from true spirituality or true religion, and your charities that you support may fall out from what you think about what the purpose of life is in the world. So that's another aspect that I think is important, and it's another aspect that people go back to in life planning. So you didn't know there's going to be so much counseling about life than it is finances. But you can see how, if you have a purpose in life, you don't have a blank Rubik's Cube. You do have goals that you're trying to accomplish, and accomplishing those goals is really important. As an example, in my religious tradition, we have the idea of financial stewardship, that you don't own anything. You are actually given it by God, and you're supposed to steward it for His purposes. And that means a couple of things. It means, first, that you don't treat people who have money differently than people who don't have money. That everyone is equal. That's a principle of justice. Because if God has given you money, it's not that you're better. You just have more work to do. Because you have to manage all that money according to His principles. And so it's not for your selfish interest, it's for His purposes. And yes, one of the purposes that He may have put on you is taking care of your family, but there are other purposes He may be burdening you with, and you need to be open to those. And so gradually, God takes white-knuckled, tight-fisted misers and makes them gradually, softens their hands and has them open their hand and give their money away. From economics, it's a crazy idea. Economists have to say that somehow the person who gives feels so good about themselves that that's what they're getting for the money they're giving. I think that's a very jaded way of viewing the world. I think it's just there is a spiritual side to life, and we're trying to bring about the best things spiritually, and part of that may be giving your money away. So another principle is therefore generosity, that you trust that God will take care of you, so you can give some of your money away to take care of other people, and you're trying to alleviate that misery, and that God may have put on your heart something that ends up helping someone else, and that's part of your calling. And then the last thing is you don't trust in your money. You trust in something higher than your money, and therefore you're not constantly at fear of what's going to happen in the markets or in investments. I mean, as I said, in my religious tradition, I even have a Bible verse. If I could, it would be our firm Bible verse. It's Ecclesiastes 11:3. Divide your portion into 7, yea, even 8 parts, because you never know what might befall the earth. So it's asset allocation. It's basically you put your money in a lot of different places and you hope for the best. And if one goes under, you still have the other 7 or 8 left. So there's principles there that might work. The other thing is, if you think about it from God's perspective, if from our perspective, it's the difference between stewardship and ownership, and you act differently when you're owner than you act when you're a steward. from God's perspective, that's not the way he would see it. Because from his perspective, the debate isn't whether he owns it or you own it. He knows he owns it. The question is whether you're acting like you own it or not. And there's a word in the financial community for acting like you own something that isn't yours. It's called embezzlement. So in my religious tradition, if you're just trying to keep it all and act like you own it when you don't really own it, well, that's a pretty serious crime. That's something you go away in handcuffs for something like that. You end up Bernie Madoff. So I think your spirituality ends up affecting a lot about your finances and the way you handle your finances. It affects every aspect of your being. And that is if it's not just a set of religious rituals you do, but it actually has changed who you are. And we're all in the process of gradually becoming who we hope we will be. And so that's a process. So maybe you're on the beginning of that process, maybe you're on the end. I've been on all spectrums of that process, and so I'm trying to each time figure out, can we push ourselves to be more generous? Can we handle things better? How can we serve people better? How can we... And so that's a gradual process. So authentic spirituality is something that I would recommend, especially in, when you're trying to decide. Nowadays you retire at age 62 or 65, you live till you're 95, and you have a good 30-year career to do something with it. And I have found that the people who retire in what's called cliff retirements, I'm working and now I'm not, don't live very long. It's a very bad retirement plan. The fact you're out here today means you're not in that group, because you have a social group and you have a group where you're learning stuff and you're doing stuff like that. It's an excellent way to stay there. But you have some people who are friends of yours who you've seen a cliff retirement, and they go from everything to nothing, and then usually 5 years later they have health problems because they're not staying active mentally and physically, they're not staying engaged socially, and they're not doing well. So part of that is being out there to make sure that you're doing well. Take that 30-year career and really think about it seriously of what do you want to do in your 30-year retirement, because you're not retired, you're financially secure. There's a difference between retirement and financial security. We are all for financial security at our firm. We hope that we can have people financially secure by the time they're 40 and 50. We don't recommend you ever retire. We just recommend you change from a paid career to a non-paid career where you can do some of the things that people are not willing to pay for, like volunteer work. So there's a transition there that I think brings about more life meaning.